Maybe I go in another room.
Huh?
Maybe I go in another room.
Sit where you like.
Good day. Good afternoon.
So today, first of all, I was actually thinking which language to speak with because
Al momento sto ancora considerando
English speakers.
la lingua da parlare.
Our translator can do both perfectly. So we have more English, Italian, more Italian speakers, then I will do the other way around. I will speak Italian today. Also because today we will do some like
Lama sta ancora cercando di decidere
of the Mahamudra.
che lingua usare.
Many of the people that are following the Mahamudra are doing the very tourism teaching.
Oggi gli insegnamenti saranno
Mahamudra teachings to continue tomorrow.
saranno degli insegnamenti intermediari e intermedi, poiché nel Gompa ci sono degli insegnamenti su Reiki. So this translation will be in English. Even though today the teaching will be a kind of break from Mahamudra, in the sense that many people who are following these teachers today are busy with the Reiki initiation with Lama Ganchen. So today we will give some break so that those who are not following the teaching today will not miss anything. Even though we would like to start with the Mahamudra lineage prayer, because in Buddhism, in our tradition, it's very important that whatever is translated and explained is passed on to us through an interrupted lineage. So it's not something I made up today, but it's something which I received from my masters, and they have received from their own masters, and so on. So today we will go through a prayer where we will pay homage to all the masters from the beginning going to today's master. Even though today we won't give specific teachings about Mahamudra, we will keep the same prayer we have been doing so far every day. So you can follow along on the text, page number 7. So when we do this prayer, we create the connection with the lineage, with the transmission, uninterrupted transmission. There's also an important concept for Westerners. When we find a kind of scientific explanation for religious topics, then we like it even more. There's a modern theory called the morphogenetic field. According to this concept, everything which is matter also exists on a subtle level and influences strongly what is in matter. It's a theory developed by a scientist called Rupert Sheldrake. And in this theory, So every family has a morphogenetic field, and every group of people has a morphogenetic field. And whatever happens modifies the morphogenetic field and also all the people who are in the same field. So whenever we use words, for example, every word has a representation in this specific morphogenetic field. So if as many people use this specific word with a certain intention, the more this specific word gets the meaning, the deep meaning. So, for example, as many people have a certain knowledge of a certain topic, as many people get to learn to soak in this topic more easily.
Perché chi comincia tanto a piacere quella cosa e uno influenza l'altro e a un certo punto diventa una cosa quasi che di matti, no?
So the more certain people like a certain topic, the easier it gets for others to learn. So this theory is also called the 101 monkeys. This theory
If you like to listen in English, we have earphones in English. So Elisabetta will help you. Perciò la teoria delle 101 scimmie,
according to the 101 monkeys theory, which was invented in Japan in the 70s, they had been doing some research regarding the theory of Darwin theory, the Darwin evolution theory. In this place in Japan, there was a special condition. There were many monkeys, many islands next to each other with different faunas and floras. And monkeys were living all over the islands, but each group evolved according to the specific characteristics of each island. According to this study, they would leave some potatoes on the beach for the monkeys to eat all over the islands, across all the islands. So in the beginning, the monkeys would try to eat the potatoes. They wouldn't like it because covered in sand, and would throw them away. So after certain time, in one island there was a female monkey learned to get the potato and wash it, eat it, and afterwards finding out that potato was good to eat, edible. So in this island, all monkeys learned the technique. When a certain amount of monkeys in this specific island learned the trick, in all other islands, as a mass phenomenon, all the other monkeys learned the same technique. How did you do it? Did you post it on Facebook? Did they send a message to each other? Look, you have to wash potatoes. No, of course. From here arises the concept. There's a certain order. So when a certain amount of people get to develop the awareness and the knowledge of a certain concept, then this spreads. Another experiment on human beings. So a certain drawing has been taken into consideration. There was an image made of several little faces, composed of several little faces, like a mosaic. This image wasn't that easy to be recognized. Researchers went to Australia showing the image to people on the street. Within a certain amount of seconds, people would have to count the number of faces to be recognizable on the picture. And the majority of people would recognize approximately the same amount of faces. They did the same experiment on TV in England, on a local TV. It was early PM time in Australia and early AM time in England.
più visto dalle persone, quella immagine, e hanno spiegato dove cedono le
So
facce
in
per fare.
Australia, they
Quindi
showed
un
in the
paio di milioni di
PM
persone hanno visto
TV
quell'immagine
news,
e
they
hanno
showed
capito dove erano le facce, per dire, nascoste.
the results were
5
the
minuti
hidden
dopo,
faces in the image. 5
in
minutes
Australia,
later,
mentre continuavano a chiedere alle persone per strada, ed aumentato in un modo enorme la quantità di facce che riuscivano a riconoscere.
so at the same sort, this wasn't
Quindi,
a TV
cosa
show
dice
in
questo
England. At
principio?
the same time on the street
Che
in
di
Australia,
conoscenza
people would be
esistono
able to
a un
recognize a
livello
higher
personale
number
della
of
mente.
hidden faces
Teoricamente
in the
abbiamo una
image.
sorta di questo cosiddetto campo morfogenetico con il quale noi siamo connessi.
So according to the morphogenetic
Ovviamente
field,
a
we
livello della
are all
società, a
connected
livello anche di un gruppo
through
come il gruppo
on the
spirituale, dove
family
poi
level,
tutte queste
society
questioni
level, every
questi
kind of
campi. È una cosa
level.
un po' difficile anche da spiegare,
It's a
perché come
difficult
queste cose
topic
iniziano da
to be
studi, chi vuole
explained.
approfondire può andare
If you
negli
want to
studi di
get
questo
more about this, you can
Rupert
find
Sheldrake.
out more
Anche la teoria delle
searching by the
costellazioni
name of
familiari è
Rupert
basata su
Sheldrake
questo
or Family
concetto.
Constellation, which is based on a
E
similar
quindi quello che
concept.
accade è che
What
tutto quello
happens
che
is that
esiste,
according
questa
to him,
conoscenza non
there's
esplora
a
solamente a livello individuale come
knowledge is
avviene
not an
nella religione.
individual phenomena, but
Più
is a
persone
more
riescono a
shared
questa conoscenza, più è
phenomena.
facile anche
As many
accedere a
people
questa
develop
conoscenza.
more knowledge, it gets
E io
more,
una volta ho avuto l'opportunità di
it gets
mettere
easier
insieme con
to get
questi
access to this
scienziati che hanno
kind of
fatto questa
knowledge.
teoria
I have spent some
cena
time with the
insieme, siamo
scientists,
stati in un
dinner
congresso
time. We went
all'Atlantico
to a
qui a
congress in
Milano,
the
dove
Netherlands organized by
appunto
Elkanen or here.
quindi ero lì insieme
I
con
was
lui
there
e
together with the
mentre eravamo lì
scientists.
seduti a chiacchierare ho chiesto,
While
bene, in
chatting,
buddismo
I
abbiamo
asked, in
conoscenza,
Buddhism we have a similar
nella quale noi diciamo
concept,
che
which is the lineage.
quando
We
ricevi un insegnamento,
consider
se in
that
questo
when
non
we
avviene
receive a
tramite un lineage
teaching, if
ininterrotto,
you don't receive this teaching
in
through an
realtà
interrupted
questo
lineage,
non fosse valido, rimane
this is
solo
not
ai livelli
valid.
storici.
It just remains on a
Ma questo
conceptual
concetto di
level.
lineaggio che c'è all'interno del buddismo, tu
But in
credi
the
che si potrebbe anche spiegare
do you
tramite il
think that this
concetto di campo
concept, this
morfogenetico?
Buddhist
Lui disse,
concept of
guarda, il
lineage,
mio
can be
modo di
explained in
disse,
the same
lo conosco abbastanza bene,
field of the
dopo tutte le
in the
esperienze che ho
morphogenetic,
avuto
according to the
con
morphogenetics
questa
field? And he
esperienza.
said, my wife is
Quindi quando
Buddhist,
noi andiamo a fare la preghiera del lignaggio, è un po' come
and we
se noi
found many
andassimo a
places,
connetterci con
more
questo
points in
campo
common. So
morfogenetico
when
e
we
questa
do the lineage
conoscenza che è stata
prayer,
trasmessa
we,
di generazione in generazione, alla quale noi abbiamo accesso. Quindi, quando noi andiamo a fare
when we
la
do
preghiera
the
di richiesta
prayer
delle
where
benedizioni
we
del
request the
lineaggio,
blessings of the lineage,
è come se noi andassimo a connetterci
we connect
con questo campo
to the
morfogenetico
morphogenetic
dove questa
field
conoscenza è presente,
where this knowledge is
anche
available,
perché noi
also because
riceviamo
we receive
insegnamenti direttamente da
teachings
qualcuno che ha ricevuto
from
i propri
someone who
frutti
received
direttamente da questo
teachings from
insegnamento.
someone else and so on, from
Quindi è un modo
according to
come
this
abbiamo per
uninterrupted
connetterci.
lineage. This is our way to
E
connect to the
personalmente mi ha
lineage.
dato un'importanza molto molto grande anche questo fatto di connetterci con
I personally give very much importance to this fact, to this aspect of
volevo fare
connected to
questa
the
spiegazione
lineage.
per dare un minimo di
So this
spiegazione
explanation
che non capisce un po' quello che andiamo a fare.
allows us
Una cosa molto
to
grande
understand what we're
è in
going to
realtà
do.
tutti gli aspetti degli insegnamenti della pratica
All
hanno
the
la ragione
aspects of the
specifica.
teachings and the
Poi
practice
quando noi
itself
riusciamo a
have a
capirlo è un'altra
specific
storia,
reason.
c'è un'altra
Whether we
storia.
can understand it or not, that's another point.
Perciò adesso facciamo questa preghiera insieme.
So we're going to do the prayer together.
E un'ultima cosa ancora su questo.
One last thing.
Con questa teoria del campo
With this
morfogenetico si
theory of
capisce anche un
the
po' di più
morphogenetic field, you
perché
can understand
utilizzare la lingua
why
tibetana
it is
per le
important to use the
preghiere, perché
Tibetan
funziona in
language to
sanscrito
do
e
mantras,
perché si
prayers in
ritrova
Sanskrit, etc.
ogni volta che viene usata con una
If
certa
every
intenzione
word is
la
used with a
forza di
certain
quell'intenzione del Puja.
intention, then the
Immaginiamo il
intention is
mantra
enforced,
semplicemente
is
è stato
strengthened.
che viene
Imagine the
ancora recitato, è
Shakyamuni
stato
mantra, which is
recitato
still being
milioni di miliardi di
recited,
volte con l'intenzione
spread
fatte fuori dalla
thousands of
pratica della
times
sola
with a
contemplazione.
special intention of love and
Porta
compassion.
naturalmente
It
un potere
naturally
particolare
brings a
questa
special
preghiera.
power in itself.
Però perché le parole che usiamo abbiano un potere
So,
particolare devono
to make sure that words we use have a specific meaning, they have to be connected to an uninterrupted lineage. So every prayer, every mantra has a specific meaning when they come from an interrupted lineage. So let's do the prayer together.
La faremo recitata un po' velocemente perché è abbastanza lunga. Okay?
We will go through the prayer in a fast way, speeding up, because it's quite long. Very often, the spiritual path isn't that simple because it doesn't concern only learning and understanding. It doesn't only concern being part of something. For example, being part of a monastery, of a Dharma center, or an institution doesn't concern only praying or having religion itself in our life. This is just the tools we use. But that means a change in our behavior and our habits. This is the most difficult part. Honestly, being part of an institution is easy.
Far parte di un
Being
monastero.
part of a monastery, if you feel like, is not difficult.
Devi
You need
lavorare.
to work, study, follow rules, but you can do it. It's not that difficult.
Far parte di una religione
Being
nel senso
part
che
of a
ogni giorno magari
religion,
fare le preghiere
meaning every
piuttosto
day you
che
pray
usare certi termini,
and use certain words,
introdurre quell'aspetto religioso nella nostra vita facile.
introducing certain aspects
Però
of
la cosa
religion in
più
our life
importante
is
di
easy too, but the
questo,
most
non so se la
important
cosa, però una di quelle
part,
sono appunto i
one of the
comportamenti.
most important
Sono le
aspects,
nostre abitudini,
are our
sono i
habits
nostri comportamenti.
and our behaviors.
Perché la nostra tendenza di solito
We
dinanzi
usually
alle
tend,
situazioni
in front of
è che noi funzioniamo
situations in
non sulla
life,
base dell'azione,
is
ma
not
sulla
to
base più che altro
be
della
based on
reazione.
action, but be based on reaction.
Perché se noi vediamo molto più spesso andiamo a reagire che
Very
a
often we react rather than act.
molto più spesso dov'è che sono i momenti che abbiamo più problemi?
Where
Dov'è che
do we
succede?
encounter more
Quando andiamo ad
conflicts,
agire con
problems?
consapevolezza o quando finiamo a
When we
reagire
react with
senza consapevolezza?
consciousness, with awareness, or when we do the opposite?
Di solito
Usually
quando finiamo che reagiamo, no?
when we just react.
Perciò che cosa succede? La nostra mente ha
So
una caratteristica
our mind
particolare,
has a
vedete?
special characteristic,
Più facciamo
which
una cosa,
is the more we do
più quella cosa
something,
diventa facile.
the more that specific action it becomes easy. So we get used to it
Creiamo le nostre proprie
and
abitudini,
create our own
creiamo i
habits
nostri, in inglese sarebbe mental patterns,
and our mental patterns.
questi modelli mentali, no? Che vengono tradurre come padroni mentali, però non c'entra in italiano. Questi modelli, schemi mentali. Andiamo a creare degli schemi,
We create these mental patterns
anche sul riferimento di che cosa è bello, di che cosa è brutto, di che
based on
cosa
what
è
is
buono, di che cosa è
good
negativo,
and bad, beautiful and
e
ugly, and
andiamo a
other
creare questi
levels.
schemi. E
So we
viviamo in
create
modo
our
tramite
own
questi schemi.
schemes.
E la cosa più difficile
The
di
most
fatto è
difficult
capire
part
che
is to understand
io percepisco il mondo
that I
tramite le mie proprie
perceive the
abitudini,
world through my own habits
però non sono
and my own
consapevole di
patterns,
questo.
but I'm not aware of
Quindi
this.
credo che quello sia il mondo,
So I believe that's a world
che è così.
which is
E io
like
lo
that,
vedo così.
simply like that.
E mi
And I
dimentico che in
perceive it
realtà
as it
io
is, but I
sono
forget
l'osservatore.
that in
È come
between
se ognuno di
there's
noi
an
mettesse
observer.
un paio di occhiali con un
It's
colore
like
diverso.
wearing
Se tu ti
glasses with a
metti gli occhiali
different
rosa,
colored
tu dici
lens.
il mondo è
If I
rosa.
wear pink colored
Tanto se
lens,
metto gli
then I would
occhiali
say the
bianchi,
world is pink. If
tutto chiaro.
someone else wears
Sono schemi che
yellow
vediamo, noi non siamo
lens,
consapevoli di aver messo
he or
gli
she
occhiali
will
rossi.
think
Vediamo
the
che
world is yellow.
sia così.
So we believe that world is pink because we're not aware
Quindi,
of our
qual è
lens.
la nostra tendenza di
So
solito?
our tendency
Cercare
usually
di cambiare le abitudini che ci fanno male,
is it to
cambiare
change
la visione
our
del mondo
bad
che abbiamo che ci
habits
fanno
which
male, o vogliamo
don't
cercare
benefit
di
us,
evitare le
or we want to
situazioni e cambiare le
avoid
persone e il
situations and we
contesto
try to
invece
change
cosa non ci
people
fanno
and
male.
situations which are not
Ecco
benefiting
perché
us in our
allora
opinion. Our tendency obviously
spesso
goes towards
il mondo.
the world.
Perciò
So
quello che accade con questo
what
è
happens?
che da una parte
On one
usiamo le nostre
side, we
abitudini,
work
quindi
on
reagiamo.
based on
Quando siamo dinanzi a una
habits
reazione, a
and we
qualcosa di
react.
difficile,
So
le
whenever
nostre
whatever
reazioni non
touches
sono
us,
basate sulla
something
conoscenza.
touches us, our reactions are not based on knowledge.
Di solito noi non andiamo a reagire
We
sulla base
don't
di quello che
react
sappiamo,
based on our knowledge,
ma
on
andiamo a
what we
reagire
know,
sulla base
but we
delle esperienze
react
che abbiamo vissuto.
on our based on our experience,
Ok? Quindi sulla base di quello che noi sentiamo.
based on what we feel.
E per questo che molto spesso
So for
succede
this
che
reason, very
capiamo qualcosa,
often we understand
però nella
something,
pratica non riusciamo a
but in
farlo.
practice we cannot do it. We cannot put it
Perché
in
nella pratica,
practice.
quando qualcuno viene e calpesta il nostro piede,
When someone steps on
noi
our
abbiamo
feet,
imparato che quando
we
qualcuno
learned
calpesta il piede, gli diamo un pugno.
that we can punch him or her.
Anche se noi abbiamo capito
Even
che
though
dare
we
un
have
pugno non
understood
funziona,
that punching someone doesn't
non
work,
fa bene,
it's not
che purtroppo
good,
questo ci
and that this leads to more problems and so on. We know it doesn't work. We know, we're aware of that, we repeated it very often, but if it happens again, we just react again. Sometimes we feel as long as we think, as much as I try, I'm still at the same point. We often have this kind of thought. I've seen many people that after 30 years in Buddhism come up with this concept, teachings don't work. I understood everything, but still I react on the same old way. What should we do to make teachings work? I'll try to explain it this way. We should somehow act, not to react. Because our tendency is, in front of situations, we react. What's the difference? Action is aware. This is the situation, this is the right thing to do, I'll be careful, I'll breathe in and out, and I'll take action, and I'll go for it. Reaction instead, it just comes, happens, there's no thinking before. In order to act differently, we should start to act consciously and change our habits. I'll try to be more clear about this. Changing habits doesn't happen spontaneously. It just doesn't happen. Something that requires time, but not only time from the perspective of just time and watch. I understand that I understood, and now I wait for what's coming. And maybe in 20 years I'll change. No, of course it doesn't happen. We need time doing that specific action. If you think that with time you will understand, you have to consider that some people will understand more, some people understand less. There's a concept which has to be put into practice, but more importantly, I'll use some example. A verbal neural habit. Someone uses some words which are not good, not polite, or used to say something he or she wouldn't like to say. How do you change this habit? If I notice that every time I use that word, there's a bad consequence, some shock related to it. At the time of my grandparents, children would receive some pepper on their mouth whenever they said something nasty or unpolite. But humans work mostly on based of reward and punishment. If I do something, there's a certain consequence, then I won't do it anymore. If I do another action, then there's a different consequence, then I will repeat it. More approximately like that. How do you create some habits to change your life? We need to remember the negative sides of some habits we have. But we need to be aware And the concept is quite delicate. Very often, when we react in a bad way, based on bad habits, for example, anger, envy, jealousy, insatisfaction, or arrogance, or, and based on this reaction, some conflicts arise. Unfortunately, here our tendency isn't to develop awareness that I haven't reacted in a bad way, but it's just that I'm the victim of the world. Or sometimes we'll say, yes, I didn't behave well, but if the other wouldn't say or do some things, then I wouldn't react like that. So I'm always the victim of the world in the end. And until we consider ourselves victims, we won't be able to recognize the negative reaction, negative consequence of our behavior. So it's our responsibility to observe our own behavior and do something to get better, to feel better. But the point is, I have this attitude, this habit. This is my own way to react based on jealousy, arrogance. So this is not good. So you need to understand the negative side. But you have to do this more and more and more, over and over. Whenever we feel or realize something, it's difficult just to remember. I remember once when I was writing in Portuguese. I was 14 years old or younger. Another Brazilian man in the monastery with me was giving me Brazilian lessons. I've never been very good at grammar, and sometimes I would forget to accent words when writing. So my teacher would ask me, where is the accent? But while writing, I wouldn't stop to get the accent on the word, even though I knew where it would go. So I kept on forgetting it. So one day my teacher sat behind me, and while I was writing, he would say, you have to accent words in the moment you're writing the word. So every time I would writing down the word at the point where the vocal would be accented, he would slap my head. I didn't like it at all. But since that time, I would always stop at the right point while writing to accent the right vocal. Of course, I'm contrary towards this because there are other side effects. But what I mean is that when we have an experience which is a consequence of something we shouldn't do, then we won't repeat it. Some people that I know say, every time I get angry, for the following 2 days I have stomachache. Every time I get angry, I get headache or other symptoms. But I see anger as a consequence of someone else's actions. As long as I see my behavior as a result of someone else's actions, it will be difficult to recognize this as a consequence. So I will keep thinking that I have stomachache because someone else did something bad. We cannot change the others, but we can change our own behavior. So something to change our own habits is to recognize the negative effects of our bad habits. If we don't see them, then it's going to be very difficult to, challenging to change them. But the main point is to bring ourselves artificially to develop a behavior which is conceptually right for us. I don't feel naturally kind with certain people.
Non mi viene naturale di essere gentile con le persone, però io so che questo sarebbe importante.
But I know that being kind to people would be very important. So what should I do? So when I'm going to meet some people I would normally not be kind to. Before doing that, I breathe. I remind myself the importance of being kind, and I make an effort to be kind. Is it a spontaneous kindness? No. But it's anyway bringing me to be kind. It's not the most sincere kindness, but it's also not a fake kindness. We're not generating fake kindness. It's an artificial kindness which didn't arise in a natural way, spontaneous way. The more I can generate this kindness status in an artificial way, the more this attitude will become natural and one day spontaneous. So every time I notice my own speech isn't good, and every time I stop myself and I make an effort to change this word in a nicer way, after certain times, after a certain number of times I repeat this action, then it will come spontaneously. We are made of habits, but to change these habits, we need to create opposite habits. We can't wait for habits to stop by itself. We need to put effort into creating a new habit. So we create habits by doing them, by doing actions. Creating a habit means beginning with something which wasn't easy before, which wasn't spontaneous, until it gradually becomes spontaneous. In this path, there are 3 levels we have to work on. There are 2 choices. I go on living life with one result of the world which is surrounding me. And current habits will stay the same, and I just go on reacting. If it's good for me, if I'm lucky, these reactions will bring good results. Otherwise, bad results. But I'm not in charge of my life. I don't choose the direction I want to go. Just leave it up to it. It's just sailing on the sea and following the flow, the current, the wind, and let the boat go. The other choice is to say, no, I want to go in a certain direction and I have to act according to this. So we have to have an inner clarity about that. We need to start to act according to our objectives. Once or twice is not enough, not even 3 times. We need to repeat this action a certain amount of times to gradually feel it spontaneous, easier. So this path has to be started physically, then verbally, and then mentally. To change mental attitudes is the most important thing. To change mental habits is difficult if I can't even change verbal habits. If I don't have control over my speech, how can I have control over my mind? To have control over speech, we need also to have control over our body. Having control means awareness on what I'm doing, what is good to continue, what is not good to change. Give a direction and follow the direction. We have many impulses, habits. from the way we walk, from our position, from the way we look at each other, greet other people, and many other things we do also physically, which are just habits. Some of them are good, some of them are bad.
anche ad arrivare alle abitudini alimentari.
Also food habits, diet.
Io mi chiedo, come posso io immaginare di
How can I
poter
imagine to
cambiare
change
un'abitudine come basata
habits
sull'egoismo, la
based
rabbia,
on
l'invidia o comunque un abuso
selfishness,
d'ormone se non
arrogance,
riesco a
and
dismettere
so
di mangiare
on
quello che
if I
mangio?
can't even stop eating a certain food?
Perché alla fine quando noi
In the
riconosciamo
end,
che c'è
when
un
we
cibo che ci fa
recognize
male,
there's a food which is bad for us,
perché non riusciamo a non mangiarlo?
why can't we stop eating it? Of course we can.
Magari perché non vediamo ancora quanto
Maybe
grande sia il
because
beneficio di non
we,
mangiare
we
quello,
are not aware of the
o
benefit
non
of
vediamo
not
quanto
eating it,
male
or
ci
maybe
faccia
we don't
qualcosa di
know
buono.
how bad it is
E in qualche
for
modo
us to eat
diciamo, ma
that
va,
certain
proviamo,
food.
va bene,
So we
vediamo.
somehow say, okay, I'll do it. And we go on like that.
E molto spesso
Very
anche perché
often,
la difficoltà
the
di non mangiare
difficulty
quello che
of
ci
not
piace
eating something we
sembra
like
più grande
seems
che la
bigger
difficoltà
than the
del risultato di
difficulty
averlo mangiato.
of the result not having eaten it. It's just one more
Proprio perché i
time.
risultati avvengono non
Unfortunately,
dalle cose
results
singole, ma dalla somma
are
dell'insieme.
generated by the sum of many
Poi se
actions
non riusciamo a
together.
mantenere un impegno vuol dire
So
che
the
non
more we
abbiamo
can keep a
allenato.
commitment,
Perciò qualunque cambiamento di abitudine
every change in habit and behavior
richiede uno sforzo,
needs effort,
richiede di mettere un'energia
needs
lì dove non viene
energy
naturale ed spontanea.
where you would normally not put energy
E
spontaneously.
purtroppo
And
noi,
unfortunately,
poi ci sono le eccezioni,
of course, there are
però nella maggior parte
exceptions,
dei
but
casi
in
per
the
metterci sempre
majority
queste
of
limitazioni.
cases and people,
Siamo pigri,
we are lazy. I put myself in it.
o no? Quando è che mettiamo lo sforzo?
When do we put
O
effort?
quando c'è una ricompensa importante,
When we see a reward, an important one,
o quando siamo fuori dalla
or
zona
when
di
we
comfort.
are outside our comfort zone,
Quindi non vogliamo più essere lì.
so we don't want to be there anymore.
Io mi chiedo, un
I
atleta
ask myself, an
che
athlete
si prepara per le Olimpiadi,
preparing for the Olympic Games,
se non ci fosse, io non conosco tanto gli atleti, non è che posso dire più di tanto, però immagino,
I
se non ci
imagine
fosse la possibilità
if they didn't
di
have the
vincere la medaglia alle
possibility to
Olimpiadi,
win the
se non ci
medal at the
fosse la
Olympics
possibilità della
or
ricompensa, del
getting an award
riconoscimento,
or
del
being
potere, di
recognized
tutto quello che
or
avviene
become a
come risultato di
powerful
vincere qualcosa
person,
al di fuori.
everything which
Se non ci
comes
fosse
along with the
l'onore del
result
poter andare alle
or the
Olimpiadi, quindi la
honor
ricompensa
of
dell'immagine,
just
di
going,
partecipare ad Olimpiadi e di
participating
essere
in
uno dei
the
migliori del
Olympic
mondo come il
Games and being
migliore nel
recognized
campo
as the
della sua
best
categoria. Se non ci
athlete
fosse
in a
quella
certain
ricompensa
category,
dell'ego di
if you
podio,
wouldn't have, if they wouldn't
come lo
have that
renderemo?
kind of
Metteremo
award for
uno
the ego,
sforzo
would
talmente
they put
determinante da
all
non
the
farlo mai?
effort of getting trained
No,
in this extreme way?
non lo so.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Ok? Quindi quello che succede è che qualunque allenamento,
So every training is difficult,
però noi lo
is
facciamo quando
challenging.
abbiamo chiarezza che c'è un buon risultato
But
da
we
fare,
know we can do it
c'è
when
una
we are
ricompensa.
clear about the
Quindi noi di
result,
solito mettiamo uno sforzo nella
the
vita
reward
o
that is
quando
awaiting for
crediamo che
us.
ci sia un
So
beneficio,
efforts in life are made when we believe there is a
o quando
benefit,
abbiamo un impegno
or
morale,
when we have a moral commitment,
o quando
or
c'è
when there
una
is
situazione in cui
a
siamo fuori dalla nostra
situation
zona di
where we
conforto,
are
quindi per limitare la
outside our
nostra zona di
comfort
conforto dobbiamo fare
zone,
qualcosa.
so that we need to do something in order to go back to our
Vi
comfort
riconoscete in
zone.
questo?
Do you recognize yourself in this?
Queste sono le tre
These are the
cause.
three main causes.
C'è anche un documentario che
There's also a
parla
documentary about
appunto
this, very well
di questo,
done.
no? Non vi dimenticate sempre. Si chiama Dishonesty.
The name is
Dishonesty, Truth
Dishonesty
About Lies.
and Truth About Lies.
Non so, in italiano, io l'ho visto in inglese, era, in italiano dishonesty vuol dire disonestà, la verità sulla menzogna. E è fatto molto bene, questo è uno studio
It's a
scientifico
study,
che è stato fatto,
scientific
nella
study,
quale lui prova
where
scientificamente
It's proven scientifically that we base on incentives, rewards,
Può essere un incentivo morale,
moral
può essere un incentivo di una ricompensa o può essere l'incentivo di una situazione che non ci
rewards
piace dalla
themselves,
quale vogliamo uscire.
or just getting out from a situation we don't like. These are the main three incentives, rewards.
E qua c'è un punto importante per la quale sto
Here
parlando di
there's a
tutto questo.
main point.
Noi siamo esseri
We are
abbastanza
beings
semplici,
which are quite simple.
non siamo così complicati.
We are not that difficult, not
Ci sono delle
complicated.
semplici regole che
There are
funzionano.
simple rules which work.
Quando noi riusciamo a capire
When
queste
we
regole, quando
understand
riusciamo
these
a capire
rules
come funzioniamo,
and how we
dobbiamo a
work,
questo punto
we
usare
have
queste
to
regole a nostro
use
favore.
those in our favor.
Perciò, quando io capisco che io
When I
funziono
understand that I
sulla base
work
della ricompensa,
based
sulla
on
base del voler
rewards
uscire da
or
qualcosa,
getting out of a certain
eccetera, e
situation
vedo che
and
ciò
so
mi
on, and
porta
I
in un
see
cambiamento, per
that
esempio lo sviluppo di più
there's
pazienza
a
o di
change,
non
like getting
arrabbiarsi
more
o addirittura
patience or
quella
not getting
sensazione
angry or
può
develop
essere
more
più
love and
generoso, sviluppare più
compassion or more
concentrazione o
generosity,
qualcosa
more
del genere, ricordo
concentration,
che quello sarebbe
and I know
importante per
that
me.
that would be good for me.
Come faccio per mettere lo sforzo
How
per
do I
sviluppare
put
quello?
effort into developing this kind of
Capendo che sono in una
attitude?
zona fuori di conforto, esco dalla mia zona di
I
conforto,
need to
dico che
understand
faccio.
that I need to get out of my
O,
comfort
vedendo
zone
bene, i benefici che vado a ricevere. Noi non lavoriamo
and
solo.
understanding the benefits I'll get
Per
from
quanto
that.
intellettualmente noi diciamo no, io
As
non
long
posso
as
non
intellectually
arrabbiarmi,
we
ma
understand
io
that
non sento
getting
profondamente
angry
mai
isn't good
il
until
fatto
I
che
really
io
feel the
sono in una
pain
zona,
which
sono
these
fuori dalla zona di
generates,
conforto ogni volta che mi arrabbio.
and that I get out of my comfort
Non
zone every
posso che
time I get
arrabbiarmi
angry.
perché
I
sapere che
understand
mi arrabbio
that
mi fa male.
getting
Questo
angry
sapere
is
non si
just
sopporta.
bad for me. Then at that point I'm able to put effort into it.
O se io vedo i risultati
If I see
negativi
the
della rabbia,
negative
ecco
results
dove
of
mi arrabbio
anger,
ancora
this
di
is
più.
also helpful.
Però è importante per noi osservare quali sono i
We need to
benefici,
observe
quali
what
sono gli
are the
effetti negativi,
benefits, what are the
quali sono le
negative side
ricompense,
effects, what are the rewards of our attitude and behavior.
chiedo scusa se sono così diretto,
Sorry for being so direct,
però dobbiamo essere un po' furbi anche
but we
noi,
need to be smart about it.
nel capire come
We need to
funzioniamo,
understand how
osservarci
we
come
work, and
funzioniamo,
based on how we work, we need
studiare
to
meccanismi
create new
per seguire la
mechanisms
direzione che
to
riteniamo giusta
follow
per
the
noi.
direction we believe is the best one for us.
E all'interno di questo noi non
In this
funzioniamo
sense,
sulla base
we don't work
della
based on
conoscenza, come ho detto,
knowledge, as I said before, but based
quindi
on
le
experience.
abitudini non
So
si fanno
habits
pensando, ma si fanno nella
aren't
pratica.
developed by thinking about them, but by action, by
Anche se
acting,
sia un'azione solamente mentale,
even if it's
sia
just a mental
nell'immaginazione,
action,
sia
which is,
nell'azione.
for example, imagination or visualization.
Però, quando mettiamo le cose in pratica,
When we put
questo
things
produce
into
dei risultati.
practice, then it becomes more
Quando
easy to
rimangono
repeat
solamente
them.
idee,
When they just remain ideas, then it's more difficult.
e qui rientra un altro aspetto
There's
importante.
another important aspect of this.
Cerco di vedere come comprenderlo, che non sia troppo pesante. Una delle cose che più ci ferma nel nostro percorso
One of the points that more stop us
non è la
in our
mancanza di
path
conoscenza.
isn't the lack of knowledge.
Capiamo le cose, non
We
siamo
do
stupidi,
understand everything, we're not stupid.
anche perché veniamo
Even
tutti
because
noi
we
da un contesto in cui abbiamo
all
ricevuto
come
un'educazione buona da quando
from a
eravamo bambini,
context
abbiamo
where
capito
we
anche
receive good
ragionare, capire,
education
riflettere.
since we were children.
Siamo
We're
molto
used to
conscienti delle
understand
cose, non è
and
che
think and reflect. So we have a good
però
base.
comunque le cose spesso non
But
avvengono.
still,
Ma una delle ragioni è perché abbiamo tanta paura di soffrire.
we are afraid of suffering.
E per questa nostra paura di
And because of
soffrire,
this
vista
fear,
però come sofferenza breve
seen
termine,
from a short-term
assorta dalla
sufferance,
paura di soffrire con una visione a
the
breve termine,
fear of
non facciamo
sufferance
tante cose.
with the short-term vision blocks us, prevents us from doing many things. Let's go back to the example of the athlete. If he's afraid of getting tired or pain in the muscles or so on, do you think he would go on with training? And does any of you trains a lot? The process of training, physically training, is quite challenging. There's a lot of pain. Tiredness. Let's imagine what happens if the athlete would be so scared of pain, or a boxer would be so scared of being punched. What would happen? I want to be the world championship. I want to win the world championship in box, but I'm afraid of being punched. Of course, it doesn't work. So what happens? Everything we do, and whatever we do, something which is part of our habits, for example, to learn something new, like medicine, when we need to learn a new job and we need to study. Is it difficult? Is it challenging? Of course it's not pleasant. It's not easy. Someone may like to study, but there are several challenging moments when I know that I have an exam and I need to study hours and hours and I feel my brain is foggy and is filled up with information. It's challenging. But if I'm afraid of sufferance, which is part of the path, I would never do it. When the objective is bigger, is more important than the effort itself, then I'm not afraid of that challenging part. Important in our path is not being afraid of sufferance, in any kind of sufferance which is included in our path. Sitting and meditating is very good, but doing it with consistency is more difficult. There are days in which you don't feel like doing it, or you're sitting meditating and you feel pain in your shoulder, in your knee, or you can't sit still. What should we do? Keep sitting and meditating. In professional sports, there's a theory, a concept, a rule, which was scientifically proved, that says that every day you miss out of training, in your development curve, you have to repeat it 3 more times, otherwise you will lose your consistency, your effort. So if you're running and every day you build up your training to get to a certain objective, so one day 10 kilometers, then 11, 12 and so on. If I do 10 kilometers today and tomorrow I should do 11, but I skip the training that day, then the following one, in order to keep the same growth, I will have to do 13 kilometers. The more I go on, the more it grows exponentially. So every day I skip my training, I need to consider that I stopped at 10, but I also step backwards. 2 days off, 2 steps backwards. So an athlete who stops for 3 days means in fact he lost 6 days of training. So if you don't meditate for 1 week, you need to remember that your mind works based on familiarity and familiarization. It's the same as training. One thing is consistency, which is of course challenging. Difficult to say I should stop talking in this way. Of course it is difficult to shut up, but it's a training. To say and then I don't say it and I use instead another kind word. What happens is that the more I do something, the more it gradually becomes natural in your life. And of course, efforts and challenges are included. But if we are afraid of challenges, of suffering, that will prevent us from get out of our comfort zone in order to grow. If we stay in our comfort area, we will continue doing what we were used to do. Is it clear? When we get out of our comfort zone, that will give us the power to change our attitude. My theory is that in life, as long as we are in samsara, guided by our mental poisons and karma, we will suffer. Suffering is part of life. But I say this is a theory, which is something that I have perceived, but I don't really know why. But my feeling is that each and every of us, in every phase of our life, we have to experience a certain amount of sufferance. If it's not for a reason, it's going to be for another reason. You change person, another person will go back on the same mechanism. If you change a place or work, then it will go back to your own old mechanisms. Not sure if you have ever felt that way. I've noticed that on several people, but also myself. If there's a moment in life where you're suffering in a certain way, until the circle, the cycle is finished, even if you try to change all the conditions, some more sufferance will arise from other sides, from other directions. So my theory is the following. If I have to suffer, it's better to suffer for something which is really important. This theory was born when I was in Beijing some time ago. And after a long time, I spent 1 month doing nothing. Before that, I was always busy with several appointments. And then suddenly I had a month taking my mom to a hospital in Beijing, where, of course, I spent several days in the hospital, leaving home 6 a.m. in the morning, coming back 11 p.m. because of the traffic. But many other days I had to wait for results and so on, so I was in this beautiful house with nothing to do. There I noticed that when you wake up in the morning and you're very busy ahead for the rest of the day, then at the end of the day you feel tired. What happens when you wake up and you've got nothing scheduled for the rest of the day? What happens at the end of the day? You feel tired anyway. So it's not true that you get tired because you're busy and you've got plenty of things to do. You get tired because you burn your energy throughout the day. So it is better to use your energy. So don't think that you don't want to do something because it will get you tired. It's like a person who feels stressed.
Alla fine dei conti,
The person will feel stressed for any other reason, for whatever reason.
perciò quello che questo riporta quell'altro aspetto che è se io
Another
devo
aspect
staccare alla
is
fine della
that,
giornata,
so
meglio
if I
usare
get tired at the
l'energia
end
delle
of the
cose della
day,
fine della giornata
it's
per
better to
qualcosa di
use
più
my
vasto.
energy to something which brings
Nello stesso
good
modo,
results.
volendo o non volendo,
So whether you want it or
la
not,
sofferenza fa parte della vita.
sufferance is part of
Finché
life.
uno non elimina le cause, non riesce a superare le cause e le condizioni
Until you
psicologiche.
eliminate
Ed
the
è
causes
possibile.
of sufferance, which is of course
Fino a
possible,
quel punto
but until that
non ho sofferenza.
point,
Però questa teoria c'è un altro aspetto ancora che aiuta a capire.
sufferance is part of our life. There's another theory which will help you to understand the concept better.
Quando abbiamo un grosso problema,
When we have a big
un
problem,
problema di salute,
health,
un problema vicino a noi, qualcosa che ci fa
something which
sentire
is
male,
touching
qualcosa che
us and
veramente
making
forte,
us very uncomfortable and
le
suffer,
altre cose che ci stanno intorno ci fanno
other
soffrire
things which
ancora
are
o
around
non
us
hanno tanta importanza più? Sì, non è che la cosa che
become
infastidisce, no,
less
tanto non noi ne rischiamo,
important
giusto?
because we don't have no
Quando
more
invece non
energy to
abbiamo problemi,
dedicate
ci
it
sono
to
delle cose
that.
che non ci piacciono,
When instead we don't have any
possiamo
big
rimanere male
problem,
perché una persona è arrivata in ritardo
then
e perché tu non mi hai chiamato
we get more
e
upset when
perché hai
someone
fatto
gets
qualcosa
late or someone
e
doesn't
perché il
call
cibo al
us or
ristorante non è
because
stato
food at
quello
the
che io ho
restaurant
ordinato
wasn't
perché
something
tu
I
mi hai affannato.
expected,
Che fine sei?
and so on.
Sto dicendo una cosa per un'altra, eh? Possiamo rimanere male per queste cose o no? Sono andato dal parrucchiere, mi ha fatto
I
un
went to
taglio
the
diverso da quello
hairdresser
che io
and I
volevo.
didn't like the haircut I got.
Però che cosa succede? Se noi abbiamo tanti problemi,
If
qual
we
è il
have
modo più
many
semplice per
problems,
eliminare la
the best
sofferenza dovuta a
way
tutti i piccoli problemini?
to get rid of the sufferance which
Trovare un
comes from
problema.
every single small problem is to find a big problem.
E anche la teoria ebrea, la
A
storia del
Jewish
rabbino,
theory is the story of the
che
rabbi
viene prima tutta la famiglia a chiedere consigli al rabbino. E vanno dal
who
rabbino,
is
io non
asked for
ricordo
advice
esattamente la
by
storia,
a
però più o meno
family.
così.
So the story is
Va dal rabbino e
approximate
dice,
like
ma guarda
this.
che io
So the
sai
family
che
goes
c'è
to the
questo
family
problema, quell'altro, perché io a
complaining about
scuola, perché ho
problems,
sbagliato, perché mio fratello, di qua, di là.
many problems about school,
Poi passa avanti
relationships,
una
and so
volta e la
on.
madre, ah no, perché mio
So
marito questo, perché
every
i figli
member of the
quell'altro, perché mio
family
padre questo.
complains, the wife
E
about
ognuno
husband and
risponde, no? Perché
children,
c'è
and
un
so
motivo.
on. So every family
Lui
member
viene e dice,
complains
ok, c'è
about
una
problem.
soluzione per
So
te.
the rabbi offers a solution.
Ricordiamoci che tradizionalmente il rabbino faceva un po' la specie del guru.
Traditionally,
Qualcosa
rabbis
decisero
were
da soli.
gurus, and
Quindi loro
whatever was
arrivavano a
said
casa
by
e
the
dicevano,
rabbi
la
was
soluzione è
followed.
questa, prendete una capra,
So the solution would be a goat.
presa la capra, mettetela nel
Place the
sottofondo di
goat
casa
in the
della
living
signora
room and leave it loose in the
e
house.
tornate da me una settimana dopo.
Please come back to me in 1 week.
Una settimana dopo
1 week later,
ritorna e dice, com'è la cosa? Ah
the
no,
rabbi
c'è
asks,
troppo
how's
questo,
it?
quell'altro,
How's it
ah
going?
no, sai che casino che mi
And the
stai
family
facendo,
answers, of
capra,
course we have some
però
problems,
c'è
but
ancora del mondo da
but the
ridere le altre
goat.
cose.
And the
Ok,
rabbi says,
soluzione un'altra settimana di calma.
okay, just spend another week with the goat.
Dopo la seconda, la terza
After the
settimana,
second
quando
or
vedi come
third
continua la
week,
storia, a un certo punto chiedi, come va la scuola? No, la scuola, figuriamoci, la scuola non va
family
benissimo,
says,
ma quella
okay, little
capra lì ci
problems
ha
like
dimenticato
school,
l'altro
no
problema.
more problems, but the most
E il
important
marito, il
problem
marito va benissimo,
is the goat.
lasciamo
What about your
stare, quello
husband?
terribile, guarda quella
Uh,
capra lì,
husband is not a problem anymore, but the
e tu
goat
sei
is
quello
really a
sporco, sei
problem.
di qua, sei di là,
He's
sei
dirty,
stanco.
and so on.
E a un certo punto le ho detto, quindi cosa volete per essere felici?
So
Ma
what do
basta
you
che ci
need
toglie la
to be
capra e via,
happy? And
tutto
the
bene.
family answers,
Sì?
let's
E
get rid of the
effettivamente
goat
funziona.
and we'll be fine.
Poi qualche giorno cosa volete? No, è solo la capra, il resto la vita va
After a
benissimo.
few days, the
Basta che ci
rabbi
toglie la
asks
capra e noi
again,
siamo
and the
contenti.
family says, okay,
Toglie la
let's
capra
just
e
get
siamo
rid of the
contenti, no?
goat, please, and we'll be
Purtroppo non
very
dura
happy.
tanto questo, no?
So the rabbi gets rid of
Dopo
the
di un po'
goat,
di
but
tempo,
after
quello che
some
si dice che
time,
uno, un'altra
we
volta,
go back to our
in
own
realtà
old
ci voleva un maiale.
situation, and we would need another goat to make us happy.
È chiara la teoria? No? Quindi io come applicare questa teoria nella nostra
So
vita?
how can you apply this theory in your own life?
Una cosa è quello che io ho ripetuto tante volte, che è una cosa che ho capito la prima volta che
first time I arrived in Albagnano, I understood when I was in Verbania. I was in the car with Francesca and Gabriella, who came pick me up at the airport. It was raining along the lake, and I realized that problems exist and will always exist, so I can relax about it. If we constantly try to solve problems, we will always find a new one. And here I would like to share a new theory with you, which is working very well in my experience. The rule is when a problem is finished, there's another one after it. So how do you avoid this rule? Just keep the problem, the first one. So whenever you have a problem which is not that bad, not that annoying, not that big, serious, but you could also solve. Very often when you just keep the problem, you can avoid other problems. Because you keep your mind on that very problem. You keep it busy with that problem. It seems silly, but it isn't. When we're facing situations we don't like or creating problems, let's remember that external conditions are a reflection of whatever we have inside which is not working. So it's not just one single thing, it's just a situation which is created by astrological aspects, hormones or karma or many other things grouped together. There's another aspect which adds up to this situation. This is also a scientifically proven aspect. According to some studies, the majority of people isn't able to judge their own feelings, so we don't really know what we feel. We judge our feelings based on the context we are in at the moment. When we feel an emotion internally, we try to interpret it, checking where we are, who we are with, and so on. This scientist explains about her own experience. One day, she was in her own lab working. Her colleague invited her to go out to a pub. She said, okay, let's go. It's gonna be a different evening, which keeps me out of the lab. I don't really like this guy, but it's okay. So they drink a beer together, they chat, and she starts feeling some movement in her belly, some feeling in her belly, a warmth which is going up, which is rising up to the throat and to the face. And she thinks, am I in love with this guy? Am I like him? At this point she gets more interested in the guy. Oh, maybe I like him and I didn't know that. So they start talking more. At the end of the evening, she's fixed another appointment with him. When she gets back home, she realizes that she's developing just a cold. Some fever, some problem in her belly. We judge what we feel based on the context we are in. And we judge things we live in our experiences based on the image and on the preconception we have about that specific thing. She was saying in this study that appearance is completely illusory. more experiments are, for example, during the birthday of her children, 10 and 12 years old. She prepared the birthday party, preparing kind of cake, which was which had a brownish color, which looked like poop, and served it on pampers, on children's pampers. Then she chose some bread jam and placed it on plasters, on bandages. Then she chose some orange juice and put it in urinatories, and people wouldn't even be able to try it. Some people would throw up even trying it. So she used her own child's birthday party to do some experiments in this sense. We judge based on appearances and preconception we have. So that becomes reality. She would explain all aspects related to the brain and so on, but in reality, we experience the world through the value we give to it. And it is important to be aware of that and understand that in majority of times, what we feel, anxiety, insatisfaction, sadness, joy, and other well-being feelings are not just caused by one thing. There's a physical component. We are influenced also by the body cycles. By what we eat. An example, for example, I was in Milano translating for Lama Lawan. Lama Lawan is an elderly Lama who has a good broad understanding of Tibetan medicine. He was given an interview to a magazine, an Italian magazine. So the interviewer was a young girl and asked Lama Lawan, what are the main problems that you notice in people, in Western people? Lama Lawan replied that he sees a lot of anxiety and stress in people, and that creates sleeping problems, insomnia, which are, according to Tibetan medicine, related to the wind element. So the main advice here was that the main problem is that you eat too many cold things in evening time, salad. In summertime, salad in the evening is good, but in winter isn't good. Because it increases the wind humor. In the evening, you have to eat the cow's tail soup, which is very fat. And the interviewer was extremely surprised, and she said, what about the cholesterol and so on? He said, just don't bother about that. Obviously, the interview was never published. We sometimes think that we have anxiety because there's a problem, but instead the problem could simply be that we didn't eat the right food. Another thing which increases anxiety. When the inner wind is very high, then the mind is always working, depending on the habits. can create a lot of anxiety or a lot of overthinking. But the majority of people experience anxiety, insomnia, and so on. Main causes of the increase of the wind element are cold, food, and desire. The more we cultivate and feed desire to achieve something, to get this and that, the more desire becomes our owner. There's a saying in Tibetan which means being aware of your desire. The more we want, the more we will want. The mind guided by wish, by desire, creates a lot of thinking, and that increases the wind element, insomnia, anxiety, and so on. So in every situation there is aspect, and there is a physical aspect. There's not always one aspect. Depending on what we eat, we can experience different results on our body, but there are also astrological conditions, which of course influence ourselves, the place we are, the people we meet, the natural cycles of our body for men and for women. For women it's easier to understand because it's more clear. But I know a lot of men who are in premenstrual phases very often, who clearly have their own cycles. There's one person that I know that once in a while gets to the point where he complains about things he doesn't have in life and complains about what's not working well in his life, and then he gets to extremely happy moments and he doesn't have any kind of problems, of issues. He's just conditioned by cycles, inner cycles. Our mental and emotional state is the result of many factors together. So, considering all these factors, whenever we feel anxiety or fear or any bad feeling, let's not try immediately to find someone or something which is guilty, which is the cause of our condition. Otherwise, for example, another example, when someone is very nervous at work and then gets back home, then the family, of course, is not culpable for that, but has to pay for that, for his condition. So whenever the problem at all at work isn't existing anymore, then when he gets back home, then he has to face his family, which was so whenever we have this attitude, we create more causes for more future negative interdependence. So it's important to act and not react. We need to understand the mechanisms of our mind and how we work. This will help us to act and not react. we also need to remind ourselves
perché la nostra abitudine
that
è di proiettare le mondo
we need
verso
to
il
keep on doing
mondo,
this.
reagire verso il mondo che ci
Because our habit is to just react towards the world which is around us. Another example.
un certo momento ascolto una musica
So I'm listening to
molto, mi fa sentire
some kind of music which makes me feel very good.
quello mi fa
It generates
sensazione di pace,
a
di
peace
gioia,
feeling, a
sentimento
joyful
d'amore, una cosa
feeling,
bella.
a
Quindi
pleasant
in
feeling.
futuro, se voglio ripetere,
So in the
ricordare quel
future,
sentimento,
if I want to experience that feeling again, I will listen to that music again.
Solo che sto vivendo un momento diverso della mia vita.
But at that moment, at that time, I will be living a different moment in my life, and maybe that music, that specific music, will generate sadness in me.
Mi fa star male.
So what's going on?
Perché quando noi sentiamo la musica, in realtà
When we listen to music,
sensoriale è solo una
the
parte
sensorial object is just part of the experience.
l'esperienza, la realtà si crea, noi sperimentiamo la
Reality,
realtà,
the way we experience reality,
è creata dall'oggetto sensoriale,
is influenced
dal
by the
potere
sensorial object, the sensorial power, the physical one,
nello stato in
and by the awareness and
È come
the,
vedere lo stesso
the,
film in due
the
momenti diversi
status
della
we
vita.
are at that very moment. For example, when we watch the same movie in two different times in our life,
Vedere un film a qualcuno dire guarda questo film è bello,
sometimes it happened to me that I wanted to show a certain movie to a friend of mine, and I watched it again and I felt there's nothing really special in that movie.
con un amico che mi diceva c'era un periodo della sua vita che era così,
A friend of mine in a period of his life
vedeva si metteva a
would
piangere, anche
start crying with whatever movie he was watching,
funzionava molto quello.
even Tom and Jerry.
Dare tanto valore che il film è buono che mi fa piangere, perché mi sa che io che sono
He was just crying because he was oversensitive to whatever movie he was watching.
Quindi quello che voglio dire con questo è dobbiamo stare attenti a non proiettare che tutto
Let's be careful not to project that everything is outside, but this is our main habit, our main tendency. So we need to remind ourselves that whenever we point the finger, we need to go backwards, inwards. So before reacting, we have to stop.
un buon livello è quello nel quale riusciamo
A good level is where, at the beginning at least,
riusciamo a vedere
we can see our own inner processes and at least not react verbally or physically. Even though we react mentally, at least we don't react in our words and actions. So that this fades off slowly. So whenever we haven't manifested it verbally or physically, it just vanishes, it doesn't get more power.
andiamo adatto anche agli altri, quindi dopo dobbiamo prendere cura delle conseguenze di quello che abbiamo fatto agli altri.
So whatever action we do, then we will have to take care of the consequences. So awareness and direction, body, speech and mind. Whenever we can do it with our body, then it gets easier to do it with our speech. Whenever we get to do it with our speech, we will be able to control our mind as well. This is starting with small things. So we can gradually do some changes in life. Otherwise we keep just reacting and blaming the world around us.
Dinanzi a questo,
So having considered this, it is important to have role models, examples that we can follow. How would I like to react in the future? How would I like to be in the future? When we cannot see our direction, we can't even imagine the way we want to be, so we end up just staying the way we are, what we are. So main Buddhist teachings are based on what we have discussed so far. Recognize what is not working, recognize what I would like to be, what I want to develop, and induce ourselves also artificially to act according to what I would like to be and according to what I would like to avoid and abandon. Of course, in an artificial way, which will gradually become natural. Is it challenging? Of course. It won't come spontaneously. It will be challenging and tiring. Sometimes we think, I'm already tired from life. Do I need also to make an effort spiritually and mentally, depending on what we want, of course. If you just want to relax and have a comfort zone, it's also good for that. Meditation is good to relax. Teachings are good to open your mind and create your own space where you feel good. But when you want to hold the bull by its horns, when you want to face yourself and change your habits and behavior, it won't be that pleasant, but results will be great. So let's remember the path, the inner path is never linear. If you follow well, you will notice that it seems linear, but it has a lot of ups and downs. You can react without anger, and maybe the following time you fall. But the main objective about our negative habits is to increase the temporal space between one fall and the other one downfall and the other one. And also to make sure that the negative actions last less. So don't generate the expectation that you can straight away stop a certain behavior, a certain action. Once you have avoided anger or jealousy, don't think that you just made it. You have to put effort in a way that whenever that kind of feeling arises, you won't follow it. So the temporal space will arise, will grow. Another metaphor is about a small monster that you have inside yourself. A dog. A dog will allow us to understand the example better. So we have a dog, a small monster which is inside us. We take him around, and at a certain point, someone comes over and starts annoying the dog. The dog barks, gets angry, and we keep holding the dog with the lead. Dog is trying to attack, and we hold him. Of course, we get to a moment where the person disappears and the dog comes down. Sometimes we just lose control and the dog, the monster, just jumps on the other person and does whatever he wants. Unfortunately, when he's done with the attack, he comes back to us. So what do we do to the monster when he comes back? Do we say, bad boy, you shouldn't have done that? We just say, oh, I'm so sorry for you, someone annoyed you. It's true that you shouldn't have attacked the other person, but if the other person wouldn't attack you, you wouldn't have reacted that way. So it's not your fault. The other person provoked you, so it's not your fault. So what happens to the monster? He will do it again with more power than ever, because his behavior is justified, and next time he will attack in a lesser time. If instead when the monster comes back, instead of flattering the dog, we blame the dog and we say that was wrong, you shouldn't do it again, no matter what the other person did to you. This is not good, don't react to it anymore. So we don't justify the action. That is the first step, not to repeat the action. First step not to repeat a bad behavior is to stop, to avoid justifying it. Is it clear? If every time I do something silly, I justify it afterwards, and keep in mind that minds always find a way to justify every action, everything. Also on a subtle level, there's a documentary very interesting which is called Human on YouTube. There are 3 episodes. In one of these, at the beginning, there's a black man which is in prison and says, when I was a young child, my stepfather would beat me up every time something would happen. And while beating me up, he would say, I'm beating you up because I love you. He said, I grew up like that, imagining that the only way to measure your love is the way you damage the other person until I reach the point of killing a mother and her children. He then says, the first time I realized what really love is when the grandmother met him and pardoned him and taught him what real love is. So until he saw reality in a different way, all his previous actions were just justified because he grew up that way and that was the only way he knew. There is a Tibetan proverb which says, the grass of the neighbor is always more green, and my own child is always right. So whenever we love somebody and that somebody does something wrong, do we tend to justify that person or to recognize that he's doing something wrong? Obviously, we tend to justify. And the same we do with ourselves. We are ready to justify everything. But every time we justify our wrong behavior or a damaging behavior, we create the base to repeat that again. We are just enforcing that wrong behavior. So we shouldn't either blame or justify ourselves. Let's imagine a child who comes to us after having done something wrong. For example, He knows he shouldn't be drawing on the walls because he's been told many, many times, but he has painted all the white walls in the house. I also did it myself when I was very young. I don't remember what was my parents' reaction at that time, but I remember they weren't very happy about it. So the child goes to the parents. He's aware he's done something wrong. So he says, look, I've done that. I'm sorry about that. Possible reactions are 1. Blaming him and punishing after he recognized himself. He didn't do something good. So what happens in the future? He won't go to the parents again. He will instead try to hide his mistakes because he experienced that opening up with parents doesn't have good results. The second possibility is that parents just say, okay, no worries, don't worry. I'm aware that this is not good, but that's nothing, no worries. Or just to find the child. So saying, yes, I understand you didn't have enough paper, so you needed to paint on the wall. So so in this case, they don't understand the process which brought the child to do that certain action. And 2, they empower because they justify what the child just did. If instead we just welcome the child and we understand that it's wrong, but we focus on solving the problem, so buying new paint and trying to fix the wall and try other ways to avoid that action in the future. This is a positive attitude. So we have to do the same with ourselves. When we are aware of behaviors that we don't like, punishing isn't really working. Justifying is even worse. We should instead welcome, embrace ourselves without blaming ourselves and try to understand how we can improve ourselves and avoid possible similar future situations. And do something to direct the energy in a different direction. In the many situations in our life, it's important to be proactive and if instead we just go on and say, okay, that happened, that other happened, then we tend to repeat the same situation and we don't change our own habits. There are techniques, meditation techniques and so on, which help us to change our habits. But the main rule is, as it's said in Tibetan, to protect the gates of our senses. How I use my speech, how I look, how I listen, how I act. The conclusion is that we have excellent tools to direct ourselves. We can't choose whether we want to familiarize ourselves or transform ourselves. We are constantly in transformation. the choice we have is the direction we want to give to the transformation that we are going through. We can't choose if we want to transform or not, but we can choose the direction we are going to give to our transformation. We are the best in the world to justify ourselves, to find excuses for ourselves. There is an essential ingredient here, which I will try to describe. It's the union between sincerity, honesty, and love towards ourselves. The danger we often encounter is that for example, we're honest towards ourselves, then we blame ourselves, we say how bad we are, and so on. This is, of course, not good for us, because it doesn't help us to change. Instead, we need to be aware of our guilty feeling. Feeling guilty is a way to justify ourselves to stay where we already are. In other words, look how bad I am because I get angry very often. I shouldn't get angry, but this is the way I am. So I have to suffer because I'm done that way, and so on. And I punish myself. And I suffer because I get angry. But we have this strange concept, or because I get angry and I suffer, I've already paid the bill because I suffer, and so on. So I've done something silly, I've suffered for that, so I've paid the bill. So we don't have to always to find the guilty in the situation. Just blaming isn't working. We need to understand that we are ignorant as everyone else, and we make mistake. We understand that it's not good. What can I do not to repeat this again? What can I do to improve myself? What is the right direction for myself? So at this point we set a direction and we put energy into it. For this reason we have to be extremely sincere and honest with ourselves. This could be the most difficult part, because very often we trick ourselves thinking that we can trick ourselves. We think we can trick ourselves when we cannot do that. By giving ourselves excuses, we trick ourselves. Profound honesty is fundamentally essential. Let's not try not to justify or this requires a lot of effort, constant effort in life. And we naturally have contradictions in life, which is normal. We can just respect our own path. Just be aware of that and try every possible way to improve ourselves and focus on the solution. So to conclude, I'm going to share a little advice, which is start with small things. Big things can be let on hold. Before moving the mountain, let's move the small rock. Another trick could be I cannot move the mountain, so I won't do anything. I won't even move the small rock because I can't move the mountain. I cannot stop getting angry. That's a mountain. But can I try not to react in small, specific situations? Yes. So let's start from there. We can start wherever we feel we can do it. So don't just build up the expectation to have major results. One last point, joy. It is so beautiful when we have clarity, when we can see. For me, in a sickness, the most beautiful thing is to have a good diagnosis, a correct diagnosis. You can find cures, remedies. The problem is that the diagnosis is not clear. So let's not be afraid of the diagnosis. Let's be afraid of not being able to follow the cures, the remedies, or not having clarity on the sickness. It happens very often that someone goes to the hospital for a test and asks Lama to pray for his or her test. And he's always asked himself, what do you mean by that? What should I pray for? That you don't have anything? Or that the results are positive? So there's no negative outcome? Or that results have the best clarity? Test results show the situation clearly. Then I will be able to, then I will move on, praying to heal the illness. People should rather be scared of not being diagnosed properly. So whenever there's a diagnosis, we should rejoice that there's something clear so that we can take action, we can follow up. Don't be afraid of diagnosis. The problem is that we don't know what's going on. When we see in our behavior there's something that is not good, it's good, it's beautiful that we can see that, because this is part of the path. The path is divided into 3 parts. In the Lodge training, there are the 3 difficulties. First level, recognize the mental poison in the moment it arises. Awareness. I am aware that I'm getting angry. But in this first phase, I cannot stop it. This is a natural process, recognizing the mental poison but not being able to stop it. I'm aware, I can see, but I cannot take action. This is the first level. The previous level, I'm not even aware. I'm doing without even being aware of that. Second level, I see something is arising and I can apply the antidote so I don't get caught by the poison, by the mental poison. Third level, giving continuity to the second level. At the second level, what happens is that I can apply the antidote, but whenever I relax a little, I just fall down again. So it is sometimes we think I see the problem, but I cannot stop it. It's good, you're at the first level. Second level, you can apply the antidote. You can keep on applying the antidote. Third level, Awareness
bello che so di
has to
avere rabbia.
go along
Che
with
bello che
joy.
posso vedere la mia paura. Che bello
It's
che riesco a
beautiful to
vedere la mia
be able
arroganza,
to
la mia invidia,
recognize
i miei comportamenti sbagliati,
anger,
il corpo
bad
improvvido.
behaviors,
Che bello che
envy,
riesco a
and so
riconoscerli.
on. So it's good to be able to recognize
Quello mi
this.
dà la possibilità di cambiare.
This gives me the opportunity to change.
Però non dobbiamo rimanere, scusi che ho
But we
lasciato per terra l'ultima
shouldn't.
cosa, però ci sono sempre cose connesse. Questa è veramente l'ultima.
This is the last point I'm going to go through.
La nostra tendenza è di
We
andare sul
tend
negativo.
to be negative.
C'ho la rabbia, che cattivo
I'm
sono, devo
angry, I'm a
eliminare
bad
l'altro, va
person,
bene.
I have to get rid of
C'ho
anger,
la
and so
gelosia,
on.
non
I'm
va bene,
jealous,
perché
it
io
is
ho
not
significato la
good, I
gelosia.
have to get rid of
C'ho
jealousy.
l'attaccamento, non va bene
I have
l'attaccamento, devo eliminare
attachment, I need to
l'attaccamento.
get rid of
E così
attachment,
via.
and so on.
Okay? Però il sentiero
The
funziona
path
molto meglio al
works much
contrario.
better the opposite way, the
Ho la
way
rabbia, riconosco
around.
la
I'm
rabbia,
anger, I'm
non
aware
devo
of it.
eliminare la
I
rabbia,
don't
devo
have to get
sviluppare la
rid of it.
pazienza.
I have to instead to develop patience.
Devo mettere l'energia
I
verso il
need to put my
positivo, non verso
energy
eliminare il
towards the
negativo.
positive side instead of eliminating the negative
Ora
side.
immaginiamo che entriamo in una
Let's
stanza
imagine
totalmente
we
buia.
enter in a dark room.
Vediamo che è tutto buio e diciamo non voglio più che sia buio.
I don't want it to
Come
be
faccio per
dark
eliminare
anymore.
il buio?
Do I eliminate the darkness?
Portando la luce.
I can just bring light.
Però per togliere il buio
But
dove devo
to get
direzionarmi?
rid of
Verso
darkness, I need to direct towards light.
no, lamentandomi del buio non tolgo il buio.
Complaining about darkness doesn't help.
Se io continuo a dire non mi dovrei arrabbiare,
If
non
I
mi dovrei
keep
arrabbiare, non mi dovrei
repeating I
arrabbiare, non mi
shouldn't
dovrei
get
arrabbiare,
angry,
non toglie la rabbia.
I
Alla
won't be
fine
able
sono
to get rid
arrabbiato
of
perché ho rabbia.
anger. In the end, I'll be angry because I still experience anger.
Invece se io vedo che non
If
mi
I
dovrei arrabbiare,
instead
quindi
am
devo mettere
aware that I
l'energia
shouldn't be
nella
angry, get angry,
situazione
and
di
I focus
rispetto,
on
nella
respect,
consapevolezza dell'impermanenza,
awareness, on
dell'interdipendenza,
impermanence
nello
and
sviluppo
interdependence
della
and
pazienza.
development and patience.
Okay? Quindi, da una parte sono molto arrogante,
On one side,
non
I
dovrei
am
essere arrogante,
arrogant.
sono molto
Okay, I shouldn't be
arrogante, e dove devo mettere
arrogant.
l'energia?
So
Verso l'umiltà.
energy should be put towards
Sono
humbleness.
ignorante?
Am I ignorant?
Non basta che sto a incolparmi e soffrire perché sono
Blaming
ignorante. Cosa devo
myself
mettere
isn't
insieme?
enough.
Sviluppare saggezza.
Just develop wisdom.
Quindi una volta che noi vediamo quello che
So
non va,
whenever we notice something which is not
dobbiamo mettere
working probably,
l'energia
which is not
verso
good, we
quello
should
che
put
vogliamo.
energy towards what we would like to
Quindi
become.
riconoscere dove è la luce e dove vuole andare.
Recognize where
Un po' come
light
nella
is
pratica
and our
dell'autoguarigione.
direction.
No, un po', è proprio come nella pratica dell'autoguarigione.
In
Il chakra
self-healing,
del
for
cuore
example, in the heart
riconosce che
chakra, I
non voglio la
recognize that I
rabbia,
don't want
non
anger
voglio
anymore.
il nervosismo,
I don't want to
non
get
voglio
nervous,
il rancore, non voglio l'impazienza, non voglio
impatience,
l'instabilità, non voglio la
instability,
tristezza.
sadness.
Vado a disassociarmi da questo, non
So
voglio questo
I
per me.
dissociate
E quindi
myself
dove
from
metto la
that,
mia energia?
but I put my energy
Verso Bodakshobhya,
towards
amore,
Buddha Akshobhya,
compassione,
love, compassion,
pazienza,
patience,
stabilità,
stability,
gioia spontanea,
spontaneous
riconoscermi come
joy,
sono.
and I recognize
Quando
myself in
entra la
that.
luce, un attimo
When
la mente
light
si
comes in,
disperderà.
darkness automatically goes away.
Questo è importante perché se noi rimaniamo solo verso il
So
buio,
if we
solo
are
non faccio quello che
stuck
non
in the
va,
darkness
entriamo
and
in
whatever we
dipendenza.
don't
In
like,
colpa, questo non va bene, ma
then we
perché sto qui,
become,
non
we
dovrei
feel
essere qui,
guilty, we blame
eccetera,
ourselves,
eccetera.
and so on.
È giusto riconoscere
It
quello
is
che non va,
good to be aware
ma
to
la nostra
recognize
energia va
what is not
direzionata
good, but
verso
our energy has to be
la luce,
directed towards
verso quello che
light,
vogliamo
towards
sviluppare,
what we
verso il lato
want to develop,
positivo.
towards the
Perché
positive side.
naturalmente lì dove c'è amore la rabbia non
Because
c'è.
wherever love
Naturalmente quando
is,
c'è umiltà
anger doesn't
l'arroganza non c'è
arrive.
più. Naturalmente se sono generoso
If I'm
l'avarizia
generous,
scompare.
uh,
Naturalmente dove c'è
miserliness
saggezza
will
l'ignoranza non
disappear.
c'è più spazio.
Wisdom doesn't leave space to
Quindi la nostra
ignorance.
direzione non è nell'eliminare il
So
buio, ma
our
nell'andare
direction
verso la luce.
isn't getting rid of the darkness, it's going towards the light.
È chiaro questo?
Is it clear? Our often is very often just to get rid of the darkness
senza guardare la luce, non si può.
without looking at the light. This is
Ok?
not possible.
Quindi questo era un punto fondamentale.
So this is an essential
Non voglio
aspect.
arrabbiarmi, metto l'energia
If I don't
verso
want to get angry, I put energy towards
senza accettare i
patience.
componenti.
Patience has a lot of components:
C'è rispetto,
acceptance, respect, gratitude,
c'è la consapevolezza di
awareness of interdependence and impermanence, many other aspects which are part of the same.
e perciò devo indurmi
For this reason, I
artificialmente ad
need
agire con
to
delle qualità che non mi
artificially
corrispondono.
bring myself to
Quindi
act
Lama mi
according to
porta,
something which doesn't arise
invece di
spontaneously.
indurci artificialmente a non avere certi comportamenti,
Instead of avoiding
vogliamo indurci
artificially some
artificialmente ad avere dei
behaviors,
comportamenti
it's
che non
better
ci
to
riguardano bene.
artificially develop
Gentilezza,
some
rispetto
behaviors which
e
we
gratitudine.
would naturally not have.
Per esempio,
Gratitude,
lamentarsi è
kindness,
un'abitudine.
and so on.
Io
Complaining,
conosco
for
chi non
example,
vorrei stare
is a
sempre
bad
lamentando,
habit. I'm
quindi
aware
cosa
that
faccio?
complaining isn't good.
Comincio a ringraziare.
I start
Non mi
thanking,
viene
being
spontaneo, no?
gratitude, being
Spontaneamente.
grateful.
Vedo una cosa, la cosa, subito vedere il difetto, no?
Whenever I see
Questo
the
quello che
negative side in something,
è assurdo. Ci sono delle volte che le persone
sometimes
sono così abituate
some
alla
people are
lamentazione
so used to
che ogni volta
complaining
che appare una
that
cosa
whenever
negativa,
there's
la prima
something
cosa che fanno
positive, the
dentro le coscienze
first thing they
è
do
andare
is
a
to
cercare
get a
dove è il difetto
gun
per sparare.
and shoot towards the problem
Invece ti dice di quello che c'è di bello.
instead of rejoicing about the
La parola
beauty
che spesso
we
dice, hai
have.
visto quella cosa che è bello? Sì, però.
Did you see that beautiful thing? Yes, but
Quindi gioiamo, no?
let's instead just rejoice about
Quindi,
it.
dove c'è l'abitudine di lamentarsi, se io cerco di non
When,
lamentarmi, è una cosa
whenever
che
you
fa bene.
try
Però
not to
principalmente devo mettere
complain,
energia dentro,
we
ringraziare.
also have to put energy
Nel
towards
principio,
gratitude,
più
towards
ringrazio,
rejoicing.
meno mi lamento. Quindi mettere l'energia
So
verso
the
la luce
more
e non
I'm
rimanere negativo.
thankful, the less I complain.
Ok? E in tutto questo la cosa più bella che c'è è che è possibile per tutti noi.
And this is possible
È un
for
atto
all
di
of
grazia,
us.
però è un
It's not
processo che si
immediate, but it's
sviluppa
a process which
nella nostra
develops
quotidianità,
in our
nelle nostre
daily
piccole
routine,
azioni, nei nostri
in our
pensieri, nei
small
piccoli
actions, in
nostri
our
esercizi
thoughts, and every
quotidianamente
other
che
small
trasformare insieme
actions
fanno
which we do
grande differenza.
every day and together
E
sum
dopo la
up to make a
meditazione,
difference.
i mantra, le
Meditation,
preghiere, le
mantras,
immagini
prayers,
e tutto il resto
images, and
servono
everything
come
else
strumenti per
helps us
aiutarci in
as
questa trasformazione.
instruments, as tools to achieve this.
La pratica viene divisa in due parti, il
Practice
sentiero
is divided
spirituale,
into two
software
parts: the
spirituale.
spiritual path,
Come praticare durante le
how to
sessioni di meditazione
practice
e come
during
praticare
meditation
tra le
sections,
sessioni di
and how to
meditazione.
practice in between meditation sessions.
Quello di cui abbiamo parlato oggi riguarda come praticare
Today we
tra le
talked
sessioni di
about
meditazione.
how to
Quindi di
practice in
solito questo è il
between
punto che tiene
meditation
più l'attenzione.
sessions. I usually put more
Diciamo, nella
emphasis
strada
in this
mattina tutti
part.
noi, quanto tempo durano le sessioni di meditazione?
The
Mezz'ora?
majority of us don't
Un'ora?
meditate more than half
Il
an hour,
periodo tra
one
una
hour,
sessione e un'altra?
and the
Una
period in
settimana?
between one session and the other one can be up to 1 week.
Un giorno?
Sometimes one
2
day,
giorni?
2 days. It depends.
Gran parte della nostra vita passiamo fra
The
una sessione e
majority of
l'altra.
our life is spent in
Quindi quello è il
between
punto su cui
meditation
dobbiamo mettere
sessions, so we
l'energia.
have to
Poi la meditazione è sempre
bring more
importante,
energy in
quello
this. And of
dobbiamo
course,
farlo parte
meditation is
delle
still very
sessioni di
important
meditazione. Ok?
because it
Quindi
sustains
questo
us in the
concludiamo
path.
qui per oggi.
So the
Domani
teaching
ritorniamo
finishes
con
here
l'orario normale
today.
che viene
Tomorrow we
seguito
will go
fino
back
all'attività della
to the
meditazione guidata
previous
alle 9,
schedule. So teachings in the morning,
alle 10:30, poi l'insegnamento alle 11. Va bene?
teachings
Oggi
at
appunto
11,
cerchiamo
but today I
non
wanted
facendo
to
il testo vero e proprio, però qualcosa che è direttamente connesso un po'
get out of the text,
delle
but
cose che ci tengo molto a cuore, insomma,
talk about
per me sono
something
molto
which is very
importanti.
important to me.
Se noi non ci ricordiamo di applicare sul nostro
Which
comportamento,
we need to apply on our
bene,
own
tutto bene,
behavior.
alla fine rimaniamo dove siamo.
Otherwise, we will get stuck where we are.